So a little bit about Cobra. We set Cobra up as a private entity about 9 months ago and set out to get it listed on the London main market standard segment, which was done, I think it was around October, November, and it was listed as a cash shell with the intention to go and find projects. And there are a lot of projects around, and some of the projects have come back about 4 or 5 times, and you keep on seeing the same ones that are being recycled. So for us it was very important to go out and hunt down a project, but also find management that would come along with the project. And again, I've done a little bit better today than Darren, because they were presenting the company with 2 directors. I've got 3 of us here today. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, hand over to Greg Hancock, who'll talk to you a little bit about how we actually went out and found the project that we actually have now secured, or the projects, apologies. And then Craig Moulton will speak a little bit about the actual projects and go into some detail around that, and then we'll be available for questions later on. So over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Rolf. And perhaps I could start by saying thanks to Share Talk for the opportunity tonight. But in addition, as I came in tonight, I was greeted by a number of Cobra shareholders. So since I haven't met all of you, but I do want to say to you specifically, thank you, because you had the trust and faith to put some money into what was just an idea, to give the directors the time to go and find something that would matter. What I can tell you is your faith is about to be rewarded, because what we have is a very, very good project which we're going to RTO onto the market towards the end of May. The reason I was brought onto the board was essentially to source and find a suitable asset for the company. My background essentially is that for 30 years, before I had all of this grey hair, I practiced as a stockbroker, corporate financier for resource projects out of Perth in Western Australia, and raised in that time between $200 and $300 million for oil and gas companies, mining exploration companies. What I do these days is I do sit on a few boards, I assist those companies in raising their money, but more importantly, I help them source projects. That's what I do. When SI Capital asked whether I would look at assisting Cobra in this endeavour, I agreed, and we then went to seek some projects. A number of projects came up which we weren't happy about, and I realised I had to sort of up my game a bit, because the stuff we were seeing not quite of the quality we would want. Markets these days require some positive things in relation to being able to get line of sight to production, to some real resources, not just playing with the paper money, but to creating something of value to deliver a return to shareholders reflected in the share price. That is what we are about. That is the sort of project I was seeking to get. In order to find that project, I had to go back to all of the old records of my days when I used to practice as a stockbroker, to go out to a few of those friends and colleagues to see what I could find. And I managed to get one guy who actually didn't have his project for sale. His project was actually being funded with private equity. Had spent about $500,000 of their own money in the previous year, albeit that project had some significant expenditure on it before then. He at least responded by saying he didn't know of any other projects, but this is what he was doing. Well, of course, it was sort of like a little bit of bait, so I had to sort of follow that up. This guy is a bit of an icon in Australia. His name is David Clark. He's actually got more grey hair than me, so which is good. David Clark is a very smart guy, let me assure you. I've actually floated a number of companies for him, and all successfully. But in this instance, he had this project, 2 projects. One was a copper project, the second was a gold project, and they came as a package. And I looked at them, and the thing I liked about them was their commonality of 2 things. One, they were both in the same jurisdiction of South Australia's Department of Mines, which meant that we had some focus. And secondly, both of them were brownfields opportunities. It wasn't grassroots, it wasn't an issue, is the mineral there or not? You know, are we going to have to start doing some beginning stuff? No. There was a resource on the gold project, and we are actually drilling beneath a mine on the copper project. So there's a level of certainty that I think the shareholders of Cobra can look forward to, and I think there's a level of certainty that the non-shareholders in this audience tonight might look forward to, should you wish to become shareholders when we raise our money. In terms of outlining those projects in a little more detail, I'll pass to Craig. Thanks, Rob.
I'll try and do this. Okay. Everybody hear me in the back there? Thanks for that, Greg. And I've got to say, from my point of view, I'm really excited to be joining Cobra. I joined as a director a couple of days ago, and then I'll come into the role of managing director once the placement's completed. In terms of my background, I'm a geologist, 16 years with Rio Tinto, and then 5 years with Cliffs Natural Resources. I ran exploration for Asia Pacific for Cliffs, from everywhere from Mongolia through the Asia Pacific region, Australia, etc. And I've got to say, as a geologist, you don't get many opportunities to work at projects like this at such an early stage. You know, I've spent probably the best part of 10 years working with Greg on and off, looking at various projects, and as he alluded to before, you know, you see a lot of projects that get circulated and try and be reinvented. Not often do you get access to projects like these. The board, which we've obviously gone through, myself and Ken Watson, are technical guys who come with a technical background, and Rolf and Greg, obviously a very strong commercial background. All of us have been in the natural resources industry for more than 25 years. I'm actually the young one. Between us, over 140 years experience. So the two projects that Greg was referring to are both located in South Australia. Anybody that's done exploration in Australia will know that South Australia is the most engaged and progressive jurisdiction to work in. They actively want you to explore and develop mining operations within the state. Two projects located here, Woodina on the Eyre Peninsula, and Prince Alfred is about 100 kilometres northeast of Port Augusta. So I'll take you through both of the projects and give you the overview. As Greg alluded to, in both of these cases, we're talking about advanced exploration projects in existing mineralised systems. So we're not out there in moose pasture looking for you know, initial greenfields exploration. This is fundamentally an advanced exploration which will become a resource development project. So Prince Alfred was an operation. It was a copper mine. It was operated in the 1880s. It actually had two periods of its life. And while you can see it was a very manual operation, they were mining copper ore, copper sulfide, around about 5% copper. It ceased operations in 1907, and that was because at the time there was a major copper price crash. What we know from this period is that they were operating three furnaces. Well, in fact, they had three furnaces. They were operating two of them. They were crushing and jigging the ore. They were using one furnace to calcine the ore and then the second one to smelt it. Why that's interesting is because that means they were dealing with very coarse sulfide ore, and that bodes very well, obviously, to extensions of that mineralisation. They had three shafts, and I'll show you some details of that in a minute. The deepest shaft went down to 270 feet, but the deepest mining only went down to 170 feet. This is a couple of photos. So in the top left-hand corner, you can see this is the operation in 1915. You can actually see the tailings sitting around the engine frame there. There was a tank leaching operation in the 1970s, which is the photo here, and they extracted about 600 tonnes of copper by reprocessing the tailings that were on the site at the time. And then the two bottom photos are more recent. It's a relatively small tenement, it's about 9 square kilometres, and as I said before, it's in the Adelaide geosyncline. It's in the Tapley Hill Formation, about 100 kilometres northeast of Port Augusta. So plenty of well-developed infrastructure, access to major roads and highways. In 1954, two of the Mines Department geologists in South Australia went and surveyed this mine. Back in the days when you were allowed to actually crawl into all of the workings and walk along the drives and all that sort of thing. Of course, health and safety regulations wouldn't let us do it these days. But the guys did a really good, detailed mapping and report of the project of the mine. What they established, that the lode of mineralisation was oriented north-south, and there was a series of these north-east-south-west cross-cut faults. Why that's interesting is because we know that some of these faults, like this one in here, actually feed the mineralisation, but faults like this one to the north and this one to the south effectively represent the extensive mineralisation. So the material to the south here and to the north is not mineralised. The rocks there are far less permeable. It concentrates the mineralisation within this zone. Now, the survey that they did, in fact I'll go on just quickly on to the next slide, the geologists reported that at the 170 foot level, this is a long section so you can see through here, that the mineralisation still continued underfoot at the 170 foot level. Wasn't quite as good as it was up in the earlier parts of the workings, but it still looked very good. Now, their recommendation was to drill the depth extent of this, and in 1960 a geologist called Nixon drilled 3 holes. He drilled 1 hole off onto the east, which was a separate test, which didn't work. He drilled 2 other holes trying to target the depth extent of this mineralisation. I'll just come back to this slide here. So you can see here that this is a cross-section, north and south into the page, and we know that the mineralisation dips somewhere between 50 and 75 degrees. When Nixon drilled his first hole, he drilled it to 200 feet. Now, it appears, because there was a lot of coarse in this hole, that he had a lot of troubles drilling the hole. What we do know is he stopped short. He never actually tested the mineralisation. The second hole that he drilled, DDH2, was clogged here. And you can see, when you see that in cross-section, or in long section rather, that this hole just went into barren mineralisation, or barren rock. It was drilled to the south of that fault. So in both cases, never managed to test the depth extent of this. And there's been no modern exploration on this site since that time. So this is a fantastic opportunity. We know it's a mineralised system. We know the grades in there are up to 5% in copper, and we can put in a short and sharp exploration program, somewhere between 5 to 7 holes, quickly to test the depth extent of that. The size of the prize, probably 1 to 2 million tonnes of somewhere in 3 to 5% copper. So that is Prince Alfred. This is just a cartoon really showing you, basically that's the mineralised block there, and there are the 2 holes that Nixon drilled. However, Prince Albert, fantastic project, really exciting, but the prize is definitely Woodner. Woodner is a much larger exploration project. Already has in excess of 150,000 ounces of gold in it. So calling it an exploration project really is not doing it justice. Located near the town of Woodner, so in Central Eyre Peninsula in South Australia. The project was actually bought by Adelaide Resources, who's now Andromeda, in 1999. The project was first pegged by Newcrest. Newcrest, on the rise of a real interest in the science, or really in the science of geochemistry around calcrete, focused on this area because they started to understand that by using calcrete as a sampling medium, that you could actually target gold mineralisation in the host rock. They started doing a lot of geochemical sampling, and actually across this project there are several thousand geochem samples, some done by companies, some done by the mines department. And they just started doing that, and then they found the Cadia deposit. Basically dropped this project as you would and started to focus on the development of Cadia. Adelaide Resources bought it in 1999. I'll just skip through that for a second. This is the discovery history of Woodner. In 2000 they did the first lot of drilling. They found the Barnes deposit, 12 metres, 3.4 grams, 35 metres, 1.8 grams. In 2003 they discovered White Tank, which is just off to the south of Barnes. Same again, 7 metres at 10 grams, 17 metres at 3.5 grams. This is hydrothermal mineralisation. It's quartz vein hosted. So we know, as per our previous speaker, that Proterozoic Archean gold systems are where you want to be looking for high-grade gold. In 2004, they discovered the Baggy Green deposit. Now the Baggy Green deposit is located about 5 to 6 kilometres to the southeast of Barnes, and same deal. So 8 metres at 4.8 grams, 5 metres at 9 grams. If I'm going to get the button right, there we go. This is an example of mineralisation, so you can see it's quartz veins hosted, has quite a lot of pyrite and free gold associated with it. It consists of a series of shallow dipping quartz veins, great for mining, obviously lower strip ratio. So David Clark, who Greg was referring to, has done a lot of work on this project in the last 12 months. And with hydrothermal gold, the key is structure. The real estate analogy for this would be structure, structure and structure. Structure controls the fluid pathways, it focuses the mineralisation, it's where you're going to find the gold. You need to understand the structure to understand how to explore for gold mineralisation of hydrothermal gold. So David did a lot of work. He had another very experienced geologist by the name of Craig Moulton that went through and actually looked at all of the diamond core that had been drilled on the project. And what David did was a structural analysis to look at the orientation of the gold-bearing veins. The problem previously is that Andromeda had been starting to drill it out. They had assumed that the orientation of the ore was all focused north-south, and therefore the cross-sections were east-west. When David Ranson did the structural analysis, he found that all of the mineralisation and the quartz veins were orientated in a northwesterly direction. Independent of that, David also had Christine Standing from Optera go through and do a geostatistical analysis on the continuity of mineralisation. This is a separate independent process, basically looking at which is the longest direction of mineralisation. So where is it most continuous? And that is a great input in terms of the structure, but it also helps you hang the whole project together. And you can see from this variogram fan, you don't really need to understand what a variogram fan is, apart from the fact that it actually shows you the direction of continuity of mineralisation. This also confirmed that the orientation of the baggy green and Barnes deposit was in a northwesterly direction. There's a couple of examples here. The thing that I really like when I started reviewing this model, I've looked at a lot of gold models from a lot of junior companies, and often there's got gold smeared everywhere. This one was done in a really conservative fashion, to the point where Christine wouldn't create a quartz vein or a quartz lens for the mineralisation unless she had at least 2 intercepts in 2 different drill holes, plus a third one in another section. To that end, you can see that in these sections there's grades up to 5 grams per tonne that aren't currently in the resource. That's baggy green, same thing, very, very similar, except slightly more flat lying. So that's fantastic. We understand the structural controls for this project, which is a great tool for exploration. But the key for Woodina is its upside. And this all comes back to the story around Cow Creek geochemistry. I won't bore you with the details of it too much. All I will tell you is that the work that David has done on this project in the last 12 months has really unlocked the key to future exploration. At the moment we have 3 deposits. We have baggy green, we have white tank, and we've got Barnes. And that's the sum of the over 150,000 ounces. As part of the prospectus we will release an updated version of that resource. However, the future is about taking this from being 150 to 200,000 ounces with an aspiration of growing it to 1 million and 1.5 million. And I believe that's seriously possible. To understand that, you firstly need to understand how geochemistry can be used as an exploration tool. This image here is showing calcium, and quite interestingly you can see there's a depletion of calcium, the lower colours, the lower numbers in blue, orientated in this northwesterly direction. Now it's the same orientation as the mineralisation. It's the strain control of the regional shear zones here, and all of this mineralisation is tied to the same sort of fluids that formed Olympic Dam and Carrapateena. So why do we need to know about that? The reason you need to understand this is because you need to take this into consideration when you're looking at the gold geochemistry. Here's 2 images here. This is raw gold, and this is what Andromeda were previously using to target their exploration efforts. Now if you look at this, the peak, the highs is where you would start drilling to find basement gold. You can see that generally speaking they're to the southwest and northeast of that main shear zone. When you normalise for calcium, straight away you see that all of the anomalism is actually focused in line with this shear zone. The key here is though that the baggy green and Barnes deposit now stand out a lot more clearly than they do in raw gold. The other indicator that you use in exploring for gold, especially gold sulfide-based or hydrothermal gold, is arsenic. When we started to look at the arsenic anomalism in this as well, we also saw that they were very strongly aligned to the existing mineralisation. So the trick then is to look at coincidence anomalies of calcium-adjusted gold plus the use of arsenic. And when we do that, we have 14 high-priority targets. Now we will drill 6 of these targets this year, and we believe that there's no reason why any of those targets won't produce equally as good results as we've already found at Barnes and Baggy Green. And hence my confidence that, or at least our aspiration, I've got to say at this stage, of taking this from 150 to 200,000 ounce resource. By hopefully the end of next year, we'll be talking about a 6, 7, 800,000 ounce resource on our way to a journey of a plus 1 million ounce resource. So just quickly to finish off then, our exploration program for this year, we plan to drill 5 to 7 holes at Prince Alfred. They will initially be RC pre-collars with diamond tails, and we'll also look to do some downhole geophysics to actually understand any proximal mineralisation around the drilling. At Woodina, we're going to drill these anomalies which we've labelled ANC 6, 7, ANC 1, 3, 8 and BU1. They're our top priority anomalies. Plus we'll also do some more drilling at Baggy Green, and that will actually infill both the currently open northern and southern sections of that deposit. I won't go through that too much. I guess just to wrap up then, it will be a busy year. We've got a lot to do. There's going to be a significant amount of news flow. We'll have over 4 work streams, including the geochem sampling, the RC drilling, and the RC and diamond drilling at Prince Alfred. Thank you very much.